Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to this roundtable discussion. To our online audience, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from where you're joining us from today. It has been an enriching and insightful week participating at the Internet Governance Forum 2025 here in Norway. My name is Rispa Arose. I work for Tender Community Network that is based in Nairobi, Kenya. Where we work towards fostering grassroots-driven development by expanding access to connectivity and digital opportunities. We are honored for this opportunity and a platform to bring our local voices on this global stage. Today, I have the privilege of moderating our discussion on a topic that really lies at the heart of digital inclusion, gender mainstreaming in digital connectivity strategies. Many of you, if not all of you, are aware of that we have 2.6 billion people that are still offline. That's a huge number, and that's a big challenge. And as we know, digital connectivity is no longer a luxury. It's really a critical enabler of socio-economic participation. Despite global efforts to close this digital gender gap, women continue to face significant barriers in accessing financial, educational, social, and health resources in this digital age. And while some governments have introduced policies to address this divide, gender mainstreaming in ICT policy and regulation remains limited or sometimes even absent. According to different frameworks, such as according to the ITU, gender is explicitly referenced in only half of national ICT policies or master plans, and the frameworks such as WIS's Action Plus 20, the Global Digital Compact, and Sustainable Development Goal SDG number 5 collectively advocate for an inclusive infrastructure and digital rights. However, without intentional gender mainstreaming in digital strategies, millions of women and girls worldwide will remain excluded from the benefits of the digital economy. So this session will explore how global commitments can translate into local actions by implementing gender-responsive policies and regulations in the different frameworks, as well as look into how to mainstream gender in digital connectivity strategies. I'm thrilled to have a distinguished panel of experts and practitioners with us today, both here in person as well as online. 3 are joining online, and I'll begin with the ones we have here. So I'll start with Josephine Miliza, who is here and works for the Association for Progressive Communication as the Global Policy Coordinator. And she will be really giving us insights from a civil society perspective on what it takes to integrate and mainstream gender in connectivity strategies. We also have Lillian Chamorro from Colnodo, who is also part of supporting community-centered connectivity in the Latin America region, and will also be really sharing from her experience working with this community-centered connectivity, what it means to support women and ensure that there's gender inclusion in grassroots community-centered connectivity initiatives. Online, I'm joined with Dr. Emma Otieno, who is a digital inclusivity champion and serves as RIFEN, which is Réseau International des Femmes Expertise du Numérique. And she is the Kenya country coordinator, championing for digital gender inclusivity and promoting women leadership in the digital technology space globally. Previously, she has served in other capacities as Deputy Director for the Universal Service Fund and also the Manager for Strategy Development and Fund Mobilization Manager. She will be sharing a lot from a regulator perspective around this topic. Then we have Wekas Hassan, who is a representative from the Global Digital Partnership, the GDIP. He spearheads the policy and advocacy engagement for Global Digital Inclusion Partnership in Asia. He has a strong background in inclusive policy development, especially the gender responsive strategies and program. And he has also implemented connectivity and community empowerment projects with particular focus on underserved areas. And then we have Ivy Tufor Hoitu, who is the Senior Manager Regulatory Administrator working with the National Communication Authority in Ghana. But for this specific meeting, she will be representing in her own capacity as ICT Development and Digital Inclusion Advocate. She has done work she has considerable experience in digital connectivity, internet development, and ICT training, as well as also has been responsible for monitoring radio spectrum bands, resolving maintenance frequency database, and enforcing authorization conditions. Then last but not least, we have Mathangi Mohan, who works at the intersection of gender, technology, and digital governance. She currently leads programs in partnership of data Crossy, artificial intelligence, where she designs global capacity building initiatives on responsible artificial intelligence and data governance across 80 countries. She's working now with the Self-Employed Women Association in India, where she leads decentralized livelihood and digital upskilling program for women in the informal economy. Yes, so that's our lineup of speakers, and I'd like to get right into the session and now welcome Ms. Mathangi Mohan to give us a keynote presentation on a recent research conducted by the Association for Progressive Communication on integrating gender in policy and regulation guidelines for community-centered connectivity models. Ms. Mathangi Mohan, please, you can have the floor.
Thank you, Risper, and thank you to APC and also the Internet Governance Forum for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. My name is Matangi, as Risper just introduced me, and I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Rhonda Zelesny-Green, co-founder and director at Panoply Digital, and she co-authored this report with Shivam and our colleagues, our team, on the gender integration in policy and regulation for community-centered connectivity models. I work alongside Rhonda at Panoply on gender, technology, and connectivity models and governance at both a grassroots level and also in the policy spaces. So today I'll be sharing insights from the report while also drawing connections to the practice and lived experiences from my own experience as well. So we can start with, let me start with the basics. So what are community networks or CNs? While they are not new, but they've been gaining global attention for a good reason. Because these are internet networks that are built and managed by local communities themselves. They usually operate in places where large telecom companies don't see a lot of commercial value, like remote areas, informal settlements, or underserved regions. But what makes them so powerful is not that they fill coverage gaps, but they are mostly locally driven, and because of their cooperative spirit, and also often they are non-profit. They allow communities to control and own their digital infrastructure, deciding how it is built, how it is maintained, and who it benefits. In many ways, these CNs represent a form of digital sovereignty as well, because they can support local businesses, they can strengthen education and healthcare systems, and even provide emergency communications when most national systems fail. And because they're rooted in community needs, they can adapt very quickly and responsively in ways that traditional internet service providers and telecoms often cannot. And that is what our report was trying to lay bare, that these networks are not automatically inclusive just because they operate in this way, and just because the network is community run. It does not mean that everyone in the community is equally represented. And we have taken a gender angle. Women, especially in rural and low income contexts, remain underrepresented in these CN governance. They are most often underpaid, or most often unpaid as well, because they contribute to the operations, but at the same time, they are underserved when it comes to the infrastructure design itself. And just for the scope of this report, we look very closely at Kenya, at Nigeria, and South Africa, because these three countries each represent a very different point in the spectrum when it comes to CNs. Because in Kenya, community network license was introduced 4 years ago in 2021, and the country also has a very mature national gender policy that touches on digital inclusion specifically. So there is definitely a policy movement, but when it came to CN specifically, what was going on was gender was not really a concern, because access and inclusion were the concerns. So women weren't exclusively included in the licensing or in the governance models. While by contrast, if we took Nigeria, CNs are not formally recognized even today by policy, and that makes any gender-focused intervention very difficult, because they are not recognized in the first place. Civil society is very active, but the regulatory space is quite closed. And when we take South Africa, CN licensing is currently under review. But again, what was going on was gender hasn't been systematically considered in the process. So even in the most progressive of the context of the three, gender is treated mostly like an adjacent, something to be mentioned later or something to be included as a layer later, or it is mostly left to the civil society rather than embedding it as part of the regulatory framework itself. So in the report, we try to ask, why does this gap exist? And we used a very simple framework, the Combi framework, to explain this, to understand the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation. And what came out was that the policymakers often don't have the data, they don't have the information, they don't have the training or the frameworks to understand how gender shows up in connectivity, or why it should show up in the connectivity. And a lot of times, shockingly, but also not, a lot of them were not aware of what community networks are. So it's a next question when it comes to, how do we design for inclusion within the community network. So first point will be to understand what they are. And secondly, about opportunity, even when they are motivated, what is the direction? They don't always know what's within their power when it has to change. Where do gender even fit when it comes to licensing, when it comes to funding, when it comes to public consultations? Like, where does opportunity exist? And thirdly, about motivation. Very unfortunately, gender is still seen as a soft issue, right? It's not something that sits at the core when you think of telecoms regulation or when you think of internet governance. It's treated as a secondary or even an optional layer, like we saw earlier. So this, using the three-part framework, we have tried and understood like what kind of recommendations will work for the ministries. Nothing to assign blame, but more in the sense of, how do we offer a more realistic and constructive way forward. So when we try and understand what gender exclusion looks like, in South Africa, for example, one of the most well-known CNs is the Zenzeleni network. It's in the Eastern Cape, and the population is mostly women. It's over 70% of the adults are women, But when you look at who owns the CN board, who attends the decision making meetings, it's still mostly men, which is like 70% of the meetings and decisions are taken by the men. The women in the community are often operating, they're operating the charging stations, collecting the fee, maintaining the equipment, but the work is unpaid or unrewarded. Not because they have nothing to say, but because the social norms, it makes it uncomfortable or even unsafe for them to speak up. I've seen a very similar dynamic in my own work in India, where I've worked with self-help groups where women artisans would show up and participate in digital training, in accessing e-commerce platforms, but they didn't control the finances, or they had to seek for permission to attend sessions and couldn't fully participate because of caregiving responsibility as well. So inclusion here will not just mean access; it should also mean a sense of ownership, a sense of safety and agency for the women, and that's not going to happen automatically, which is why the systemic interventions are also required, because like we can get to the most important part of what can be done. While the report offers a suite of policy recommendations, I would like to just highlight a few examples, because we have tried to approach it from how do we tailor the recommendations for each ministry involved, because we wanted to adopt a whole of government approach as well. So one would be for the ministries of ICT in these countries and beyond, should require a gender impact assessment during the licensing processes itself for the CNs, and or some kind of an incentive for women-led CNs, and they can design more simpler license procedures to reduce the barriers for women to access the leadership roles in these cooperatives or in these networks. And when it comes to the gender ministries itself, they can introduce quotas for women in the CN governance, fund women only training spaces when it comes to community networks or access cooperatives, and also campaign against online gender based violence, because that is also a major deterrent, which is keeping women offline. And to the finance ministries, they can of course offer subsidies for smartphones or for connectivity for low income women, or provide tax breaks, consider providing tax breaks to the CNs with strong gender inclusion or women-led CNs. And finally, for education ministries, to mandate that public ICT training programs include a minimum percentage of women, so that they end up funding digital literacy for women in rural and underconnected areas through the CN hubs itself. While this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to share some highlights. And through this, we hope that we don't treat gender as a checkbox, but more like embedded within the design principles itself. And to close, I would like to iterate what Risper earlier said, that we often want to say that we want to bridge the digital divide, but if we don't address or even consider the gendered digital divide, then we are not really closing the gap, but more like building the infrastructure on top of the inequality and marginalization that is already existing. And community networks they give us an opportunity to do things differently, to make things right. And we definitely need to take the opportunity up and design for it and regulate in it and invest more in these networks. And yeah, with that, I want to say thank you, and I look forward to the discussion as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Mathangi, for really giving us a grounding on what community networks are, what community networks bring towards bridging the digital divide, as well as speaking to some of the challenges that exist with regards to thinking of connectivity, not thinking of gender. When thinking about connectivity, having gender not as an afterthought, but thinking through it even at the inception stage, at the design stage. And this is, as you've correctly said, is the opportunity that community networks bring in connectivity strategies. Now, this really gives us a good segue to the next speaker, who will touch on some of the challenges that women face when trying to build and sustain this community network infrastructure. Lillian, who has not only worked with community networks but also supported the ecosystem, will share her experience on what are some of the specific challenges that women face when trying to build this infrastructure, this community-centered connectivity infrastructure. Lillian, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel and also for the question. Okay, from the experience of accompanying this type of initiatives, we can mention some of the challenges for women. One of them is the care work that women must assume makes it difficult for them to participate in the different activities involved in the implementation, but also in the maintenance of the network. Often they must assume a double working day when this care work falls almost exclusively in women. Other challenges for some women, especially in rural areas, have low self-confidence, as they do not feel capable of appropriating technologies and technological knowledge and access to this technological knowledge. So they prefer to stay away from the processes, or they feel shame to be present in these kind of processes. There are some stereotypes in the community and in the women themselves to participate in technological processes. Roles associated with the low ability of women in technology are normalized, but also around their low participation in decision making and leadership. Then positive actions are required, but also appropriate methodologies that provide women with confidence in approaching and appropriating these issues. All these result in more difficult to be part of workshops or participate in training processes, and in many occasions there are difficulties to leave the home and participate in these kind of spaces. Finally, I can mention lower access to technological devices, since other expenses are privileged and there are not appropriate technological tools to assume certain tasks.
Thank you so much, Lillian, for sharing some of the challenges that women face when trying to build and sustain connectivity infrastructure. Being just working for Tanda Community Network, I totally relate with some of these challenges, starting from the low confidence level. It really takes a lot, especially because community-centered connectivity is very technical. There has to be some encouragement, some technical training, some sort of mentorship to even get women coming in to support the network infrastructure bit of the connectivity at the community. And this really helps to frame the challenge of this discussion today. And what I would like to hear from the next speaker, Wakas, who's joining us online, is what do you see as the core disconnect to why gender is still largely missing from connectivity strategies? Why do we still have a huge gender gap within the different connectivity strategies? And yes, over to you, Wakas.
Thank you, Rispa. I hope I'm audible. So I think much of what you just asked was covered by Matangi as well. But if you see it from a holistic level, there are, of course, several factors which are dependent on geographical profile and the level of ICT development and things like that, and lack of data awareness capacity of the government itself to understand and then act on the problem. But from my own experience, from my previous life with the government, I think there are a few things that I have observed. And I think two of them stand out for me, which I would like to, of course, share with all of you. The first one is that the connectivity strategies are still primarily developed from an infrastructure mindset, and that mindset is based on the assumption that if you provide access and expansion, coverage expansion, that is somehow synonymous with inclusion. Now, the thing that if a particular community is then provided with mobile connectivity or broadband or whatever the mean, uh, there is now an equal opportunity for men and women to use the digital services. Uh, but I think what they need to realize is that irrespective of how much technological innovation we bring about, uh, infrastructure development does not mean equitable access. There are inherent barriers of portability, skill, societal norm, online safety and security. These are the challenges and the structural inequalities that the women face um, throughout the whole ecosystem that prevent them from using the internet, despite having access. So I think this is the first thing that I observed, uh, having this change in mindset where they have to look at access as just a means, not an end. It's a means to an end, but the end is different from what access can provide to the community. And secondly, I think this digital gender empowerment is still considered as a social issue. That requires a cost to be solved. Uh, but it is never just a social issue. It is a socio-economic issue, and there is undeniable evidence around that. Uh, our own research, GDIP's research, it proves that that the exclusion of women from the digital economy in the developing countries uh, has caused about $1 trillion in the loss of GDP over the last decade. And if it continues, another $500 billion could be lost over the next 5 years. So I think this realization and this advocacy angle that we also pursue as GDIP when we talk to the governments is that it is not just an women empowerment issue or a social issue. It is actually an economic crisis that we want to avert here, all of us together. So I think I'll just end with saying that this is the realization that needs to be that needs to be propagated through our interactions with the governments, that they have to integrate gender in the connectivity policies and then take concrete actions on it. Not just mention it like we see in many of the policies, like the IT policies or the broadband policies. Gender is somewhere mentioned in those kind of instruments, but never really the essence of those policies. So I'll just stop there. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Okas, and thank you for bringing in such heaviness on the consequences or the grief loss that we face when we are not inclusive in our strategies, when we are when the agenda is left behind in promoting or in, for example, connectivity strategies, then it means not only social loss, but it goes to even economic loss at the global, from a global perspective. And with that in mind, I want to move to the next speakers, who are the regulators. Dr. Emma from Kenya and Miss Ivy from Ghana. From a regulatory perspective, why is it important to integrate gender in digital connectivity strategies? And building on what Wakas has just mentioned as some of the losses that we are having because of the gender gap. What do you think is at stake if we don't mainstream gender in these digital connectivity strategies? I'll start with Dr. Emma, and then we'll move to Ivy, Miss Ivy.
Okay, thank you very much, Rispa, and I really want to thank the speakers who have gone before me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to start by looking at the question you've asked. Why should we really worry, or why should we really prioritize this subject of gender inclusivity? And my simple answer would be that we have contracted both at the global level and at national levels and agreed generally that we will not leave anyone behind. And we said we will not leave anyone behind because we want the world connected to the last person who's under a cave, or if there's another one under the sea, they must all be connected. So for me, when I sit at the national level, that is the mantra of a digital transformation, leaving no one behind. When we go international, be it at the UN level, be it at the International Telecommunications Union level, be it at any other forums, the WCs, and any other place where the subject of digital transformation is being pursued, the agenda has been leaving no one behind. So when we come with the eye of the regulator, because we've been actually why regulation exists is to create enabling environment so that the government can achieve the broader social economic development goals. So for us to achieve that, leaving no one behind, which is very critical for the government's socio-economic development, we must pursue goals, we must pursue regulations that are going to ensure that we are meeting the 100%. Right now, when we look at the statistics in terms of coverage or how we are reaching out people, we have now two categories of connectivity, that is a coverage gap, and we have the usage gap, which is actually becoming even a bigger menace. And for all these categories, women seem to be more impacted, or the fact that women are still left behind seem to be what is dragging us from actually causing us not to achieve the big objective. Like if I put a case of Kenya, let's say coverage, we have the last 3%, which is mostly in the rural and the hard to serve areas where mostly women reside. And we need to reach them. And I think one of the things that I must mention here is that bringing on board this conversation with the mind of having community-centered networks or community networks is going to help us address that issue of why we must, and ensure that the why is addressed. And that's why Kenya has really prioritized the issues of licensing community networks. And we are going out to support women so that we can address that issues of why. Because what is at stake is the globe will not meet its SDGs, which is translates to not meeting our socioeconomic development agenda. I'll leave it at that, Rispa, so that I can give a chance to my other colleague. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emma. Over to you, Ivy.
Yes, thank you. And am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning from my location. So one of the blind spots I would touch on is most of the time we perceive technology as gender neutral, and policies are made that technology will benefit everyone equally. But we have diverse needs. And so one thing we are lacking or is that our blind spot is equitable access and distribution of technology as against gender neutrality of technology. It is assumed that technology or digital policies are inherently gender neutral and will benefit everyone equally, which is not the case. Most of the time, the focus had been on overall connectivity metrics without disaggregating data or considering how societal gender inequalities translate into digital disparities. And this is largely due to data deficiencies in gender disaggregated data on digital access, usage patterns, and online experiences. Voices had been promoting gathering of ICT indicators and all that, but the in-country, the countries, how often do we disaggregate these data? even if we have to analyze them, do we analyze them based on the gender-specific needs? And here, gender, I'm talking about going even beyond women. The gender definition cuts across children, the physically challenged, the elderly, and women, which most of these people are mostly underrepresented. And policies or regulations usually does not affect their specific needs. And it's all because the data we collect or we gather, we collect them holistically without disaggregating them. So policies are made generally instead of maybe equitable basis. And it makes it difficult to identify these specific needs. So this is one of the blind spots that we are lacking. And I believe if it's addressed holistically, it can address and target the needs of all these specific genders. Most of the time, yes, it's women, but there are also even the elderly. We are saying inclusivity, connecting everyone everywhere. I saw go. But how can we reach out to these people if we don't understand their specific needs? If we make regulations or laws equally, that whatever we have in place will benefit everyone equally, it cannot. My height, I am short. Someone is shorter or someone is taller. You cannot give us the same level of a tree to climb or something. One of them will need a ladder to be able to climb the tree. The other will not need a ladder. So we need to disaggregate the data we collect, okay, make specific indicators based on the specific gender needs. And I believe it will address these blind spots. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ivy. Thank you so much, Dr. Emma, for bringing in the regulatory perspective to this conversation. Before we move into the next segment, which will be looking at now, we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the problems, the gaps that exist, and what is at stake. Before we move to some of the solutions, I'd like to see if there's any question or any comment online or in person. If you have any question, you can just move to the round table. We can take it. Yes, we can have that question and then move to the next segment.
For your presentation, my name is Kweku Entry from the Ghana IGF. There's something so organic of what you're talking about in terms of community network, which is speaking about collaboration and being able to provide solutions to the problem. One of the things that I always see as being helpful in some of this is more about what I'll call our community businesses. And again, this is gender-based or women-led, especially in Africa. I don't know about Lillian's experience in Latin America and the rest. And what you would find, I think there was a report about a year or two ago from MasterCard Foundation, which found that most businesses in Africa are run by women, small, medium enterprises. That's what I mean. And I think one of the things and the challenges and opportunities in thinking about how we'll go, I don't know how the next conversation is going to be, is one, what I would like to call synthesizing or having organic technologies or solutions in terms of connectivity, where you'd see that most of our local businesses, the small, medium enterprises, are small businesses. But how do we get them digital or being able to do it? An aspect about the work we do in community networks is about imparting digital skills. And I always give this keynote. Coming from Africa, we are multilingual. And most of the things that we do needs to be owned by the people who can be able to speak their own language or interpret it. So my point is this. The skills impartation and things that we do, we need to be able to translate into our local languages. And I'm giving this for free. I've been doing this for 5 years. Let's try and translate things into our local languages. And the best people to be able to do that are language teachers or retired language teachers. That's what I say. That's inclusivity in gender. Second part is including our medium-sized businesses to get them digital, to teach them the skills, and also give them their business experience and create that business environment which gives opportunities to give value to our connected. And you'll be surprised. You probably might be getting financing from some of these local business. So that's what I'd like to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I believe it was just to add to the conversation that the speakers have shared, and absolutely agree that diversity should also go beyond just the gender, but also look at languages, look at age also. How can different age levels contribute to the digital connectivity for different communities? This now will take us to the next question. I don't know if there's any question online.
There's no question, just a comment from Peter Balaba. He says, I do support the establishment of community networks approach in Kenya. However, collaboration with community libraries and information centers can help bridge the gaps. In Nakeseke Telecenter and Library, we are now focusing on empowering the youth and women in digital skills, and we train them in the local language to enable them understand the basics. So it's just a comment and not a question. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Josephine. To the next segment, which we will have another round of interventions from our speakers. We'll be looking at what will take to realize the gender inclusive connectivity. And now I'd like to go back to our first speaker that gave us the presentation remark, Ms. Mathangi. And Lillian, if you can talk about what actions are necessary to better support the emergence and sustainability of women-led connectivity models. You've already mentioned what are some of the challenges that are and barriers for women to participate in community-centered connectivity models. Now, what are some of the actions that can be taken? For Mathangi, you can talk about some of the recommendations that that came out of the research that you've just presented. So I'll start with Ms. Mathangi, and then we can go to Lillian.
All right. Sure. Thanks, Rispar. And while also talking about the policy lens and recommendation from the report, I would also like to share something that I've seen in practice, because while working with some of the self-help groups and particularly the Self-Employed Women's Association here in India, I've seen where like we supported some of these artisan-led cooperatives access digital markets, and that too during the first and the second waves of the pandemic. And then what happened was something very interesting, was that to address the connectivity gaps in several clusters of villages, actually, the women managed to have shared hotspot system, not like the community network, but also not very unlike the CNs that we spoke about earlier. And they used to train each other, watch tutorials, and figure out how do they ensure it gets to the online inventory and all of those, even troubleshooting the basic tech issues. They supported each other. But the catch was it was sustainable only because the initiative worked because it was under an umbrella like Seva, where they could step in to subsidize the hardware. They could, like one of our audience members pointed out, they coordinated all the training in their local language, Gujarati, and they anchored the work in existing self-help groups. So then what finding came out was very similar to what we also studied in the report, that if you remove that scaffolding, that model would not have survived, or it would not have been sustainable. So combining these two insights, just quickly summarizing, 3 recommendations would be: first, the licensing frameworks for these CNs need to very explicitly accommodate non-registered collectives, informal women's group, like some of them rightly pointed out, the MSMEs and SMEs, these are majorly owned by women. So supporting a more informal women's group, that is also equally important. because these are mostly cooperatives rooted in trust and solidarity, and just assuming that it should be a registered entity and a technical documentation. So that's also going to exclude a lot of groups. And secondly, there are a lot of already funding mechanisms, but one key insight is that the funds should also allow for experimentation, and thereby allowing failure and more iteration to figure out what works and what does not work, because these community networks are not going to scale if you take a startup timeline and when we compare. And third, should be echoing Wakas's thought on, this is not going to be a social inclusion or women's empowerment work, but it's going to be a socio-economic, it's going to be an infrastructure work as well. And it's time that we recognize that. And this could mean paying stipends to local women, managing their Wi-Fi and maintenance, and doing all the operational ground level operations, recognizing the digital caretaking that involves that entails as a form of labor, and also not leaving out individual champions when we look at the community networks, recognizing who is anchoring these and who is pulling this together. So it's not just going to be what they are doing well, or just if the access is there, but also go beyond it and see as an infrastructure work. Yeah, so these are three recommendations that I would like to add.
Thank you so much. Lillian, anything to add?
Well, thank you. Yes, I have a few a few actions that we think could improve women's participation. And okay, one of them is establish financing funds, both for technology but also for training with special conditions for women's participation. For example, in closing the gaps in the basic use of technological devices and technological literacy, and facilitate access to devices. Also, adapting methodologies that transcend the technical approach for the community networks, and also consider other women's interests and needs related to the care and the support of the community. This diversification of roles in technical, administrative, and communicative areas. The communities should promote the participation of women in technical areas such as installation and support, and also men should be involved in the administrative and financial aspects of sustainability. Also promote the participation of women in leadership roles in the communities without neglecting the recognition of the importance of the care work. We think it's important to recognize the importance, because sometimes the women, for example, in our case, when we were working on establishment of community networks, of antennas, of that kind of things, many women are caring of us, are working on the food, working on the care of the people and this work is not recognized, and we need to recognize that. Promote the participation of women in discussion spaces, make women in the field of technologies visible so that they can serve as reference for other adult and young women in traditional masculinized scenarios. Reflect on care and how to approach it, recognizing its value and establishing mechanisms for its redistribution. People who require some care should be assumed as a collective responsibility of the communities. And if it is necessary, resources should be allocated within the spending structures for the care of these people. Create women circles. We think women circles are a very good methodology where women can express their concerns, opportunities, difficulties, not only about technology, but also about their participation in the life of the community. In any case, the action should be respectful of the environment and the values of the community, since we often find ourselves in communities with very different visions of gender roles, and we are not looking to break with the local tissue, but rather to seek spaces for dialogue and reflection on the opportunities and inequalities faced by the women and other population. Finally, Conversations on gender must be strengthened in the entities and organizations that accompany these processes, both in men and women. If these reflections have not been integrated in our own work, it would be difficult to integrate them in the processes of accompanying the communities and in the spaces that are generated from there.
Thank you so much, Lillian. And what I like about the recommendations that you have brought in is that it's coming from working at the community level, and you know what the challenges are and what best practice can be adopted by community-centered connectivity strategies at the grassroots. And that really fits in also very well with what Mathangi has just presented, coming from a research report that she conducted in different countries within Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And together, these are really strong actions that can be taken to support the emergence and sustainability of women-led connectivity models. Now I want to go to back to you, Akas. When we are talking about gender mainstreaming in digital connectivity, Pakistan is one of the few countries with a dedicated gender strategy for digital inclusion. Can you share with us how this strategy has been developed? What is the impact of such a policy, as well as what lessons we can learn from it for other countries that would currently lack such framework?
Yeah, thanks. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. When I was working with the Pakistan Telecom Authority, we thought of doing something around it, and that was basically the start of it. Just to put this into context, Pakistan was the country with one of the highest digital gender gaps in the world, according to the GSMA's Mobile Gender Gap Report. And this gap was persistently stuck at 38% for about 3 years. So we had this discussion within PTA on you doing something about it, and then there was this internal team at PTA that was formed, an all-female committee. And GDIP at that time was also one of the key supporters of the strategy development process, along with some other partners. So what PTA did essentially was that they adopted a collaborative and evidence-based process which involved all of the multi-stakeholders that were somehow engaged with this issue. So following that all-inclusive policy development process that we usually talk about in the internet governance circles, there were stakeholder workshops, there were expert interviews, and there was this timely data from multiple sources. There was a public perception survey. There was, I think, an IVR survey from around 100,000 respondents using with the help of the mobile operators. So when all of that was put into context, and then this strategy was being developed, it shaped up into the form of a strategy where there is, at the top level, there is this high-level steering committee, which consists of the institutional heads and led by the IT minister. And under that steering committee are 6 working groups. Groups like access, research and data, affordability, safety and security, digital literacy, inclusion. And in between these groups, each of the group has its own chair, by the way, is the implementation body, which is PTA, and now GDIP has joined PTA as the joint coordinators for the strategy implementation. So with this whole framework that you can see that there was this whole of government approach that was adopted, but for the implementation itself, it is now essentially a whole of society approach that has been adopted, because all of the working groups have representation not only from the public sector, from the private sector, and also from civil society, from telecom operators, from national statistical organizations, you name it, and you'll probably find a body in one of the working groups contributing to one of the working groups. And one unique feature about this strategy is the support it extends to community networks. The working group on access, it is mentioned in the strategy as one of the TORs of the access working group that it will draft policies around around community networks, and it also mandates the establishment of 15, at least 15 community networks across Pakistan. So this is one of the unique features of the policy that I really like and very relevant to the discussion that we are having today. Now, in the latest report that has just been released by GSMA on mobile gender gap, Pakistan's gender gap has actually reduced from 38% down to 25%. And this is the largest reduction in any of the surveyed countries, which are essentially the developing countries that GSMA has surveyed. So I think in terms of lessons for any policymakers out there, I think we would recommend that, first of all, please follow the inclusive policy making process. Make sure that all of the stakeholders are on board if you want to develop this kind of a strategy, and also take the best use of other use cases, like best practices examples. And a lot of organizations are also working in this space, including ourselves, including APC, GSMA, and others. So I think this is an example from a developing country in the South Asian region having the widest gender gap in the world, along with Sub-Saharan Africa, of trying to make a difference in the state of affairs and actually achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wakas, for those great points, and really, it's good to know that this can be done, and it has been done from Pakistan. And also, thank you for sharing some of the things that we can be in consideration of when thinking about a dedicated gender strategy for digital inclusion. Now I'd want to go back to Dr. Emma and Ms. Ivy, who are online as well. If you could propose one policy or practice shift to improve gender integration in digital connectivity, what will that be, and why?
Okay, thank you very much, Rispa, and I really thank Wakaz, Marangi, and Lillian for the insights that they've provided, which really link very well to what I'll provide as an answer. And I like the Pakistan example and the way they have actually gone ahead. So if I would just make it short and say, which is this one thing that we can actually do, be it at policy or as an initiative to make this improve or work better. I'll go back to this, the statement that Mathangi gave during the first session of the presentation, and cited Kenya as even having a national gender policy, which is true. But we have the policy, and the policy has been there for quite a number of years. And it also speaks about issues of digital inclusivity on matters gender. But why are we looking at the report that Wakas has talked about? We're still at about 39% gender inclusivity gap. We are where Pakistan was years ago. So it is because of something, I think, which we're not doing, and that is what's going to be my answer to your question, Rispa, is that we have not been intentional in terms of putting in these clauses in the policy, regulation, strategies. We are putting them in as aspects of satisfying the social or compliance aspects, but not meaningfully and intentionally putting them. And after we have also inserted and we've ticked the box of we have a policy, or we have a framework, we have a guideline, what has lacked completely is measurement, the intentional and meaningful tracking, measurement, so that we can see what are the outputs out of these policies or this policy clause that we have put in to promote digital inclusivity. What is the outcome? What is the impact? And then how can we sustain, or how can we improve, and which are the areas that are paining? So when we ask anybody, even in the area of policy or in the area of regulation, or in any other space, we don't have that information. And Ivy said it very well. Lack of even having disaggregated data to the extent that we know exactly at the point that we stand, what is the pain point, and how do we move from here to the next step? So for me, in terms of just having frameworks, most African countries are doing well because we are really complying with the issues of SDG 5 of equality in terms of having those policies. But meaningfully measuring them and looking at them as contributors to socio-economic development is what has been lacking. So to summarize that answer is that we must actually start to implement things like the gender intentional digital infrastructure designs in terms of intentionally measuring, tracking, monitoring impact, and feeding back through so that we sustainably improve to ensure that we are going back to closing all the gaps and, of course, my first answer, leaving no one behind. There's also an aspect of how can this be supported? Somebody mentioned that, as I think the gentleman from the audience. PPPs, bring together partnerships and collaborations, because we cannot achieve this as government alone, or as regulators alone, or as the private sector alone. We must bring on board the financials. We must bring on board the people who are volunteering to say that they can actually translate into the local languages. We must bring along the people who can cause devices to be cheap, connectivity to be cheap, access issues. So those partnerships become the base of ensuring that actually we are making the progress in this regard. So two things: measurement and collaboration and partnership, so that we achieve these aspects. Thank you very much, Rispa, sorry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emma. Very, very important to consider. Well said on the two critical aspects that we could be cognizant of while thinking about gender mainstreaming. I'd like to now hand it over to Ivy, Miss Ivy.
Yes, thank you. And picking up from where Dr. landed, it's true, we need the metrics and we need the data. And this point will also build from the blind spot I mentioned earlier. The first thing starts from here, from the IGF here. We need from here the communique to move or go with cross-sectoral collaboration. For the past 5 years, multi-stakeholder collaboration has been pushed. We are doing well, and I believe we can do better to address these gender-specific needs. So different sector regulators often operate in silos with limited coordination with ministries responsible for gender, education, health, social development, etc. This fragmentation prevents holistic approach to digital inclusion. Our focus now should shift from one specific ministry to handle digital connectivity. At least we have now known a lot of sectors, governments know that ICT has become an enabler to all sectors. So we cannot sit as ICT ministry or policymakers and make ICT decisions without these sectors. So we need all of them. What IGF has done well in recent past is to involve members of parliament who are key legislators and lawmakers. I believe as they were involved, they have come in to understand the specific issues of what IGF address, and gradually is making impact, especially in my country, Ghana. In the next decades, we need to create this platform, expand it, extend invitations to educational ministries, finance ministries, tax experts, to also come to the IGF, come to the table. We need to involve them, closely involve them. Once they sit on the table with us, understand the issues, when they are formulating their sector-specific policies, they will maybe have budgets or targets for contributing to ICT. What we don't usually have is infrastructure fund. Usually this fund is taxed or contributed by mobile network operators, the ICT sector. But ICT goes beyond just the communications ministry or the regulators. It's affecting every sector. So if a fund is created, it shouldn't just be, the contribution shouldn't just be on the limited few, the operators. The contribution should come from each of these sectors who are benefiting from ICTs, and this can help to promote community networks establishment in underserved communities. Lastly, one other thing we can do in formulating ICT policies is that stakeholder engagement. Doctor mentioned that the ICT frameworks, they are there, they've been developed for years. It's the lack of implementation. Yes, they may have been prepared or drafted without extensive consultation, but it's not too late. As we leave from here, we should involve all these stakeholders, especially those that these women-focused activists, gender activists, consumer advocates. When we are developing or when we plan to implement them, we need to involve them because they represent this specific focus group and they understand the issues. So when we involve them and we understand their basic needs, that is when we can formulate these policies target and address their needs specifically, not making it generally, but making it specifically or addressing their specific needs. And when we do that, we get to know their issues that are bothering them, that is a concern. Then it will enable policy formulators to implement or draft and develop the right policies that will address the specific gender needs. For instance, if it's children, as ensuring their protection online, we cannot make a general broad ICT policy just that is going to address everything equally. It cannot. We are moving from equality to equitable distribution. We need to understand the specific needs and then target them specifically. So with online, with women, we have those who are educated, those who are not educated, those who work in various sectors, and we will prepare these regulations or policies to target and address these specific needs. And when we do that, it will encourage them to use the technologies because now we've gone beyond access. Availability is there. There's availability, it's access that we are struggling to. Someone mentioned meaningful connection and access, which is key. So to be able to address this and make it meaningful, we need to understand the issues. So cross-sectoral collaboration in terms of preparing ICT policy and regulation is key in addressing gender mainstreaming issues in digital connection. Thank you.
Very, very well said. Ivy, thank you so much for those interventions. I wouldn't want to dilute it further. We'll just take this time to see if there's any question on the floor and online. We have less than 5 minutes for any question, any comments that you'd want to contribute to this conversation.
There's no question online. Also, just a comment that women are the backbone of every society. Mm-hmm. There are fewer women taking part in the digital connectivity strategy. All they need is motivation, guidance, and support to get a lot of them in the space to make better policy. And this is from the IGF Ghana Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would really want to extend our gratitude to our panelists and speakers for your honesty, your clarity, as well as your valuable contribution to this discussion. I would say that we cannot tire to talk about inclusivity because it's towards the goal of connecting the unconnected as well as bridging the digital gap. So it's important to always think about inclusivity at all aspects of connectivity as we implement in our different countries. We are really grateful for the time that the regulators have put aside to come and share about some of the experiences and insights. Thank you from the communities for sharing what are some of the challenges as well as best practice that can be adopted further. Today's session has really reminded us that gender mainstreaming is not just about ticking a box. It's not an afterthought. It's about shifting power as well as shifting policy and practice to ensure that, as Dr. Emma has correctly said, no one is left behind. And as we continue this conversation throughout the week, the remaining few days here, let's remain intentional in asking who is missing, why are they missing, and how can we redesign systems so that they are truly inclusive by design and by default. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Josephine, for online moderation, and also thank you the IGF team for making this hybrid exchange possible. Yes, once again, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you in other spaces.